Hello everyone, you're watching Speak Your Mind with Dr. Ryger, our weekly series on psychology and societal change. I'm Nessa Alawi, founder and CEO of Join Mayshad, the New York-based company that empowers women on a daily basis. I'm here today with Jan Mercer-Dam, our VP of Development, and Dr. Risa Ryger, our clinical psychologist and investor in Mayshad. And today, our guest speaker will be Lindsay Landman. Hi, Jan.
Hi, everyone. It's a Monday. Happy Monday. Welcome to Join Mayshad. We're so thrilled and excited to start each and every week with you. We invite you to visit our website at joinmayshad.com, where you can learn about all of our upcoming content and programming and workshops and so many different ways each and every week for all of you to stay engaged, involved, and excited with all of us as we create the new world together. As Neza mentioned, we're an ecosystem of brands for women by women, connecting women to each other and to the companies, causes, and organizations that celebrate equity for women professionally and personally. Let's get the show started, Neza.
Thank you. So July 4th holiday is approaching. This is a very special year with all the societal change, all the introspection on a society level, that personal level, and professional level that has been happening this year. Dr. Ryger, could you tell us a little bit about how to celebrate it this year better, differently, with all those new values that we are trying to reach out to, of inclusion, of diversity, and bringing the richness of our different identities here in the USA?
Well, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And Neza, as always, you start off with a wonderful question. And when I was thinking about this show, and I'm thinking about 4th of July this year, and how much importance there is to bringing in how we both differentiate ourselves, how we distinguish ourselves, and also where our challenge is also finding our unity. And so we're in a spot at the moment where we're really in two places. And so there's an acknowledgement of our uniqueness, our backgrounds, our heritages, and how important that is in terms of embracing it and as a way of defining ourselves. In contrast to perhaps another point in time, an earlier point in time where where our differences weren't as celebrated and our differences weren't as welcome to bring to the forefront, and unless you had something to distinguish yourself, an accent, a different way of dressing. Your accent is very, very charming, Neza, I want to say, but at another point of time, people may not have experienced it as charming, but just as different. And there was really much more of an energy to putting us in a blender. So we would become homogenized. And so, but that was what, at another point in time, what being American was about kind of being in a point of sameness. And at this point in time, we're really looking at how we can be unified and also really be able to celebrate, embrace, and be proud of, and really feel a sense of pride in where we come from and what that has brought with us, what that brings to us, what that brings to our lives, and how it enriches us.
So I would like to get deeper on this question on what does it mean to be an American now? You've touched a little bit about it, but what does it mean to be an American now, beyond this crisis, beyond everything that we've seen, but also in a world where we're seeing that there has been more diversity over the past 2-3 decades in populations here, and What is it to be an American now post hashtag Me Too, post Black Lives Matters, and post COVID-19?
Well, when you're asking me this question, I really think back to some of the books that I've read about the American Revolution, and I really mean that. This was not a preparation, so this is just a spontaneous response to it. And one of the problems that unfortunately there weren't that many, or they're inadequately sung heroes of the women, but our founding fathers, and I'm without a doubt there are our founding mothers. We don't know as much about them as we might wish to, but the challenge that needed to be solved was, how do we take these states and become united? How do we take areas that are so disparate and have such different cultures, different terrains, different needs physically? You're growing up in the middle of the woods, you're growing up on the shore. All of these, and that's just from a land perspective and what life looked like on a daily basis. So how do you take the needs of such a diverse space of land and people and needs and different backgrounds, and how do they become united under something with some basic tenets that people are able to say yes to that? So what do we do when we have so much differentiation? How do we get to yes? And that was a challenge over 200 years ago. And in some extraordinary way, it is the challenge of the moment. With all of the needs and people absolutely not only needing to be recognized, demanding to be recognized, but it's also just absolutely a requirement that this happens in a real and true way and not just as a rubber stamp. How do we get to a place of yes? How do we get to something that we can all say, yes, I am unified with that? And perhaps one of the ways right now is about equality, and that that this is our challenge. Our challenge now is to find the place where we can be unified and we can call ourselves, what it was called, which was the United States. And the United States, if we really think about it, well, what is a state? A state is the people who live there. The state isn't the mountain. The state isn't the river. That's not what's going to unify us. But how do you unify, in some respects, enough of people who can say yes? And that in this way, we find our common ground and a way that we can say yes together. Yes to our humanity. Yes to our needs as human beings. Yes to mutual respect. And I think that's on kind of very overarching, maybe philosophical perspective, but taking this philosophical perspective and then translating it into actions and behavior and moral requirements, and how we feel we want to purport ourselves as human beings in this world with respect for one another, and really what that means, and really how that feels and what we bring to it. And I think that's really the spot. And so on the one hand, it's a very personal question, and we are compelled to find some way of saying yes, because unless we can do that and within ourselves find a unity and a hopefulness, it's going to be really hard to get there. So on one hand, it's a personal issue. And on the other, we have also what our country is supposed to stand for. And our job at this point in time, as it has been everyone else's job at their point in time, is to really live, what is it? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we can really stand up for that, go ahead, Jan. You're ready to ask a question. I see you.
So many questions, Risa, so many questions. And there's so much to unpack here,
yes.
Right? Because you hit so many different nails on so many different heads, particularly around, I think, there's the sense of where America is the melting pot, like we're the land of opportunity. And when you think about all the phrases and all the catch slogans that really drive home how special and unique America is, from the United States of America and all of those things that Risa, you so eloquently mentioned. But there's also a lot of unpacking to be done in the sense of there's this vision of meritocracy in this country where if you work hard enough, you will be seen, you will be valued, you will be recognized, you will be compensated and rewarded. But we know in large part that also depends largely upon the position in which you're born into which family, into which community, into which culture here in the United States as well. And understanding that when our founding fathers and mothers created this country, that equality wasn't the same for everybody, right? And I think when we've talked a lot in our shows with you, Dr. Ryger, around unconscious bias and what that means, and understanding the different ways in which we all hold unearned privilege in our own selves, and needing to come to terms with being open and honest and transparent around those conversations and communications to help us get to a different place for ourselves individually, and therefore then be more impactful as citizens of the United States. Talk to us a bit about that.
Could you take what you just said and give it to me
yes.
a little bit more in a bite-sized way? And I only have myself to blame because I came out with a very big statement that you're now contradicting. So, but if you could, I would appreciate it.
This is going to be such a fun show, I can tell. So, understanding that, this is not the land of opportunity, or historically has not been the land of opportunity, right? And so we have a lot of slogans that we all really, truly believe in our hearts and minds that, yes, this is the United States of America, that this is the land of opportunity, that we really wanted to be a meritocracy, but many of those things haven't been true over time for very specific people, right? In the sense of who could own property in the beginning of this country, the right for free speech, the right to bear arms, the right to assemble, all the different rights that we hold near and dear to our hearts. Different people experience those in different ways. And do you feel, Dr. Ryger, like in this moment in time, like these conversations will be more frequent in the sense of understanding the historical unpacking that we as a country have to do to get over many of the isms, the racisms, the sexisms, all the different ways in which oppressed groups are still oppressed to this day, is now a good moment in time to really think beyond that. And how do we do that as a collective?
Well, the way that thank you for making that slightly shorter and more defined. So two things. One is that we need to start tackling it, of course, on an individual basis. And one of the basic rights that we have, there has been a lot of discussion about that lately. I don't want to hijack us into another conversation, but that has to do with voting, and that it's imperative upon all of us to vote and to exercise that right that we have. So that's one thing. I mean, certainly, the meritocracy isn't such a meritocracy. As you were talking, one thing that came to me was I was thinking about there's a saying, I don't know if you all have heard of it, but being a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. And now I just want to say that there's some real gender bias in there. And let's just call it out for a second. I haven't heard anyone say anything about being a member of the Lucky Egg Club. And so, but being a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. And so what does it mean? What does that mean? I mean, the fact that there even is such a saying means that, there can be just a certain amount of luck and being fortunate to be born into, a family and an environment that can provide, well, let's start at, opportunity. There's also the opportunity to be loved and loved and cared for. But then there's also what sorts of opportunities are open to you. And so it's it's a hard spot. We hear about, the meritocracy and people going past their difficult beginnings, but we have to really be clear about that. We're not where we need to be. We're just not. We're not where we need to be racially. We're not where we need to be in terms of gender and equal gender pay. We're just not where we need to be in terms of being able to hold a respect for our differences and a respect for our similarities.
Risa, and quick follow-up to that too, as we know that June 19th was Juneteenth, which was Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, and Independence Day for Black Americans here in the United States. And, we often think about, like, what does it take for historic moments in time to become mainstream in the way that we all celebrate? Going forward, is June 19th a day for celebration and a day for reflection and remembrance in the same way that July 4th is for the people of the United States of America? Do you think in this moment in time, particularly what is happening with the pandemic, and the pandemic really being a true mirror for all that is unequal in this world, or at least in the United States, if not globally, that this is now a moment in time where there'll start to be heightened mainstream awareness and appreciation for difference and diversity and inclusion?
Absolutely. And with disruption, and certainly this isn't planned disruption, but with disruption, when the earth is turned over, when the shovels are in the earth and the earth is being turned over, is an opportunity to plant something new. And generally, change happens at times of difficulty. It's not necessarily at the point where things are like nice and quiet. And it's like, well, let's do something and make a change. It's oftentimes at times of difficulty. And, it's kind of their opportunity is in some vineyards. I know this is a big leap here, but in some vineyards, people who own the wineries, they're not allowed to use irrigation. They're not allowed to supplement water. And there's something called stressing the vines. And so what happens is when you stress the vines, that the vines have the challenge of growing deeper roots and really getting more solid into where they are and growing deeper roots to find the spot of water. And if nothing else, as this is a horrifically tragic time, and let's be very clear about that. We've had over 100,000 people die, and we've been witnessing firsthand horrific, unconscionable murders, that it behooves us even more in respect of that, in commitment to the inequality and the tragedy, to dig even deeper, as we are the ones who are now above the earth. We have the imperative to dig even deeper and find our inner strength, not only for ourselves, but to take that inner strength in the service of others as well.
Dr. Ryger, before receiving our host and our rock star event planner and talk about celebration, I would love to just talk about identity. And as I asked earlier, what is it to be an American now? My other question is, what does it take with your psychological background? What does it take to belong in a country? And by country, it doesn't mean a community. It's a country, and so that hosts many communities. So, do we have to go into? I'm talking on an identity level. I think that a lot of people that arrive here mistake belonging with getting rid of their past identity, and it has a lot of psychological effects that I would love you to share with us. So what does it take to belong?
Well, at this point in time, it's important to own who you are. And not leave parts of yourself behind. You know, I've talked a little bit about disruptive self-ownership, which is a formulation that I've developed and a program where we really need to have ownership of all of who we are. You know, the positive, the parts of ourselves that we, you know, that we love, the parts that we're, you know, kind of so-so about, and the parts of ourselves that we kind of like have pushed to the back of the closet and have put everything else that we could find in front of it. And we don't put in a new light bulb. You know, we keep that closet dark. And so in order to really to be able to be fully present, we need to own who we are. We need to own our backgrounds. We need to own the backgrounds of difficulty, of striving, of ease, of challenge. And to be able to find in that what may have made you push it to the back of the closet to begin with may not be what's happening for you right now. And so it may be that some of the things, you know, some of the ways that, you know, to your point, Neza, of, you know, how do we take our backgrounds with us? That we can take adversity, we can take challenge, we can take hard times. And instead of feeling some sense of shame or wanting to detach from it and disconnect from it, that we're able to step into it and really be able to pull out strength, determination, fortitude, resilience, grit, and really what it took to be able to get to where you are now and who came before you in order for you to be able to do that. And that somehow that is also a part of your history, your personhood, part of your DNA and what you bring with you. So coming to a place where you can connect with it and see the good, the strength that came along with that. Because if you're talking about people coming in from different backgrounds and from different countries, a lot of people come in during times of adversity, that there is a strength, and people don't necessarily come in with a lot of means, but they're starting from somewhere. And that to be able to look at that and feel a sense of pride and strength, accomplishment, grit, and feel like you've got some of that too. And that it's a place of pride.
Thank you. And I would also like to add something. A big factor of violence is a loss of identity, and a big factor of extremism is when you've been pushed to lose your identity because you felt that it was part of the process of belonging, and then you drift away from it, and at some point you come back so strong in an extremist attitude because you feel that you've been fooled, that you've been bullied, to actually lose your identity to be able to be successful. And so for all the other ones that don't have to go through that process of belonging here in America, they need to understand that through their unconscious bias of wanting the other one to lose their identity to belong here, they are making them a violent person, and they are making them a future extremist person that will come back violently at them. The beauty of this country, with my very strong international background, is that it is a young country that has enough space and enough diversity to welcome all the different types of characters and communities into becoming a strong patriotic American who will be embedded in the American values, who will proudly carry the American passport, the American flag, the American laws, yet it is a country that can let them be who they are and can take that identity as well as an extra richness. So we're gonna introduce our speaker.
Hang on one second. Hang on one second. I can't. That was so eloquent. I have to hop in for a second. So, Neza, you put it so beautifully, and it's as simple. Belonging can be as simple as you're sitting on the bus. Well, we'll get back to buses. We'll get back to subways. This is happening. You're sitting on a bus. You're sitting on the subway. Somebody comes near you who doesn't look like you, right? Do you move over a little bit and make a space for them? Or do you stretch out a little bit and make it clear that there isn't a spot for them? And so in our lives, every day, we have multiple opportunities for inclusion and for moments of this micro kindness. And we also have opportunities to let people know that we're not making room for them, that they're not welcome in our space. And so this is what we have every single day. So thank you for opening that up so that we could be at this moment for right now.
Thank you. So Lindsay Landman, President and Creative Director of Lindsay Landman Events. Lindsay is the planner of choice of the country's most influential business and tech leaders, a sought-after event industry speaker and go-to media resource. Lindsay has provided insights on weddings, design, etiquette, and entertaining for dozens of publications, including the New York Times, InStyle, New York Magazine, Martha Stewart's Weddings. Lindsay is a longtime recipient of the Knot's Best of, Vogue, Harper Bazaars, and Brides have each named Lindsay Landman Events on their list of the best wedding planner in the world. Whoa, what an honor to have you today, and especially in a time and a season where we feel that we need that celebration more than ever. Hi, Lindsay.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here and so honored to be part of such an important conversation that, of course, touches on events and celebration, but is obviously just so much bigger. And everything feels so much bigger right now, but I'm really delighted to be a part of it.
So we have seen over the past weeks and months that every single celebration that could have passed like something that was more celebrated on a personal, small level was very strong on social media. And just Father's Day yesterday was celebrated, where everyone was posting pictures of their fathers and birthdays, and so what do you have to say about that, about this desire to celebrate more, and where does it take us in terms of this July 4th and how we're going to celebrate it this year more than the other years?
It's so interesting to think about celebration sort of in contrast to isolation, which is where most of us, all of us have been in these past months. And when I thought about it, sort of in a business context, thinking about what does my business now look like going forward when we need to be apart and we can't be together. And, there's a fear for me and for those who make a living by making gatherings where humans need to be in the same space. Will we ever be back there? Can we be back there? And I think what we have learned and seen in such sort of abundance is this deep desire for all people in all cultures to gather. And we've seen it, through social media, of course, sort of, people posting how they set their table for dinner, which, like, who cares? But it's an indication of saying, like, we want to be doing more than we can be doing right now, to how people are gathering in the streets. I think that is an equal representation of sort of this deep desire to live out loud in this way that oftentimes gatherings and parties allow us to do, which right now they can't. So how else can we do it? How can we show what we love and who we are and what we like to do, more so than to try to celebrate it out loud?
And Lindsay, when it comes to creating experience in your business, how could you do it during COVID, and how do you see yourself offering it over the summer?
So I guess there's a practical approach to an answer and a more fundamental approach. Certainly in the practical approach, I have been doing an exploration into the virtual event world that I will be honest in saying I never imagined myself possibly even considering this, the idea of creating these virtual celebrations, whether it's to raise money for a foundation or to have a baby shower. And so I've learned a tremendous amount about the technology that's made, obviously calls like this happen, but also celebrations happen. So I think that's the very practical approach. But what I'm seeing is now that, through the COVID restrictions and sort of these different phases, I'm seeing every inch we get, everyone wants to take a mile. And so from a professional standpoint, I'm sort of in these dilemmas. In the state of New York, they're saying outdoor gatherings up to 25 people are a possibility. So I'm already getting calls being like, oh, do you think we could get away with 40 people? Do you think we could maybe do 50 people? So it's, of course, the balance of safety and security versus, having these celebrations. But the desire is there, the excitement is there. And so now it's thinking about, how do we find the most important core elements of celebration and keep them as like the core tenets of what we're going to plan, even though the things that we used to do to celebrate, whether it's dancing or sitting closely at a table, even though those things maybe are not possible, what are the root needs that we have been solving for with parties and with celebrations over time that we can kind of continue to stick with and sort of make more prominent with these types of celebrations?
I will tell you something, Lindsay. For the past decade, I've organized big global events, whether it's a conference or a classical music concert with the orchestra of the Met in the desert of Morocco. And so huge event that demands a huge logistic, and then thank God it didn't rain on that day, and thank God, like everyone could make it from different parts. And now when I'm thinking of the future of creating those big international events, I am considering also strong digital presence, because not everyone can make it on a specific date, especially when you get to the leaders of this world who all have an agenda. And so I like what you said. You said, let's try to think of what is the core experience of celebration. And so what is it that we need to keep, and what is it that we can maybe digitalize or make lighter or make with a little more space. Dr. Ryger, I would love to bring you in the conversation with maybe a question to Lindsay on where does her job and your expertise meet on the bridge between psychology and event planning when it comes to celebration?
Okay. Celebrations can take on such profound meaning for people. And there are different, celebrations that we look forward to our whole lives. And so I talk about it in terms of anticipatory joy, right? We have anticipatory anxiety when we're going to go get the shot, the blood work or whatever, but we can always have these moments of anticipatory joy. And you, Lindsay, provide this extraordinary moment of helping people manifest their joy. Just as a fast share, Lindsay and I were talking together on Thursday, and I promised her she wasn't going to have to talk about a recipe for vanilla frosting, and then we also talked about how boring it would be. I mean, because we were talking about how do you bring your heritage, right? How do you bring your heritage? How do you bring your background? How do you bring something that's important to you into whatever gathering you're going to have? And that if everybody came with the same potato salad, it would be pretty boring. So I'd love for you to, come at this from how we show up, how we want to represent ourselves. And for you, you're the person who needs to connect to that vision, or even the vision that someone doesn't have yet, and help people express it in a way that feels congruent and represents who they are and what's important to them.
I love this. Okay, so I think so many things. One of the things that we spend a lot of time thinking about and talking to our clients about is how to be a great host. And I think that the idea of being a host is almost one of those things that has gotten lost in translation in more modern times. People think about it in a very sort of traditional Emily Post kind of way, or even a Martha Stewart kind of way, which doesn't feel fresh and modern. But I think that that is actually at the core of creating environments where we can bring the joy, and we can also bring a great sense of comfort to each guest who is going to come. And I was thinking when you were talking earlier, what came to mind is that when we arrive at an event, I mean, there's this obviously always anticipation before that. And I've been talking to people so much about it when creating virtual events. How do we maintain the anticipatory joy? I love this expression so much, when all you're doing is coming to your computer, because some of that anticipatory joy is traditionally from picking up your favorite outfit or getting a blowout or doing whatever things that you do to kind of get ready for a party. But when you don't have that, how do you still maintain it? But in thinking about sort of, that experience of coming to an event, I think that a guest needs to come sort of being vulnerable without being fragile. And I think in so doing, they come with sort of the opportunity to learn something and to share something, and not be intimidated by the environment. And so it's a two-way street. As the host, you want to create an environment that is welcoming, that is warm, that gives everyone a place. And we do that obviously in strategic ways of how we set the room and how we set a table and how we, give you your name card and how you find your seat and those kinds of things. But I think it's so much more than that. It's so much bigger and broader than that, which is how to do something that feels personal to each person, and that allows them to come and be themselves and not be squelched by the environment. And I think when that is what is in front of you, you can be more authentically yourself, and you can give a little something to the person next to you and also take a little something from them, which to me is the best possible outcome from being part of a celebration.
Lindsay, I'm curious, in this moment, finding that the experience has shifted so dramatically in the way that it's becoming even more heartfelt and more genuine, because it's less about all the stuff and less about all the physicality of it, and more about the connection, whether that connection is digitally or social distancing in face-to-face physical settings.
I'm seeing two things. So the short answer is yes. I do think that, people are finding the core reason that they want to celebrate, to get married, to have a bar mitzvah, to celebrate a graduation. I think that core celebration is there. And especially when they are sort of once in a lifetime milestones, like these are the things that we've been thinking about. How does a corporate event carry on differently than how a social event carries on, where it's celebrating a once in a lifetime, whether it's your high school graduation or a wedding. So I think people are really trying to look for sort of those core values, and focus on them, and forget about, we sent an invitation for our date in March and now we're having our wedding in September. Do I print another invitation? Like those types of things have become a little bit less important, while people are just so grateful to be able to have something that they couldn't have before. But on the flip side, we work in the land of luxury, and there's most of the things that I provide are not things people need; they are things people want. And and I think there's always sort of a moral battle that goes with that, with sort of the excess and the opulence that can go with a really big event. And again, these are the kinds of things I've been thinking about, how this comes into question and how this will play out for me professionally and for my clients personally. And what I've found is that those who have decided to make these big investments and to do the splashy things and to still spend the money on the flowers and the bells and whistles, but have decided to just hold it and do it in a year from now or in a year and a half from now, there's something that I've found quite satisfying and pleasing about the knowledge that they made those choices and they made those financial commitments. And those also meant something to them in a way that they were willing to wait to do it. I had a particular client, the couple's from Kuwait, and they had their actual legal marriage in Kuwait. So they've already been married. And then their intention was to have their sort of Western American wedding here, which was supposed to be in April, then it was supposed to be in August, and then we didn't know what we were going to do. And I was basically sure they were going to cancel because they're already married. I mean, they don't need to have this wedding. And, in talking to the couple about it, what they came to is that, this is something that we want as part of our story. We want this celebration as part of our history when we look back on our wedding, and we're willing to wait for it. And I will say I was totally delighted and surprised. But it reminded me that it's not just about being showy when people are making these choices. This is about their choices and their story. And so I've really seen it both ways, and I've kind of been delighted both ways.
That's so fascinating, so interesting. And I love what you're saying around just, what couples are doing and what families are doing and friends are doing in the sense of creating the memories and creating their own stories and creating, the legacy that they want to have attached to the experience in total. Are you also finding, Lindsay, during this period of time that people are doing really creative things if they don't want to wait until to get married or wait until to celebrate that special anniversary, but doing some really creative, think outside the box ways of celebrating, even if it's in the digital space?
Yeah, I mean, this has really been pushing all of us. I think no matter what field you're in, we've had to really come up with some crazy ideas. I think that one of the things, being based in New York City and living in New York City, my perception of sort of what is possible is obviously quite different than if you live, in a suburb of Philadelphia or a suburb of anywhere, to be honest, where you have like a yard and people can do these drive-by events. I don't know if you've seen any of them online or in your own neighborhoods where, there's sort of like the drive-by parade for so-and-so's graduation, which I'm like a little jealous of that because I can't make that here. And people are doing cool balloon installations outside people's homes and things like that. So, I found that sort of those spontaneous ideas that really caught on and took root really fantastic and exciting, I think, again, from an industry perspective and from a personal perspective. But, we're trying to spend a lot of time thinking about if we're looking at each other through a screen, how do we still feel close? How do we forget that the technology is there and just think about the experience? And this is very challenging, particularly when thinking about guests from all different backgrounds and in all different age demographics. The comfort of a 24-year-old on a screen and an 84-year-old on a screen are very, very different. And when we're talking about a wedding or a baby shower, a bridal shower, that's what we're talking about, a 24-year-old and an 84-year-old. So how do we sort of create that comfort? And, I would say like I'm the biggest like party nerd. Like I think about like the science of parties in a really deep way. And so part of that is because I feel like I have to, but, part of that is thinking about the sort of how do you create an experience that in and of itself is engaging regardless of the medium, right? So it's like if we're in person, it would be engaging. And now we're not in person, we're on the screen. So we're doing everything from virtual cocktail parties, wine tastings, flower arranging classes, where guests are actually receiving these items in their homes the day before the event or a few days before the event. And then we have sort of a leader, facilitator on the screen, but there is a live component where people are engaged and they're all sharing this experience and they're laughing because this one spilled and this one doesn't know how to cut the flower. But again, 24 and 84 can get their own joy from that. And that's sort of what we're looking for, is how to create the individual joy when like this screen doesn't give me any joy. How do I find it? And it's pushing all of us, and it's kind of great. One of the things I've spent a lot of time thinking about is this is not going to go away. What we've learned in this period, I think we will return, I hope we will return to a lot more in-person interaction and celebrations of all kinds. But I don't think the benefits that we are learning from this virtual experience are going to leave. We think about it with a nonprofit that, is doing their annual benefit, and they're used to raising money from the 250 human beings who sat in a room with them at, a hotel ballroom. And that's where they made their money, from those 250 humans who were able to physically get their body into that room. Now, what this same nonprofit has learned is by sharing this link, they can reach people with money anywhere on the whole planet. It doesn't matter where you live. It doesn't matter if you can get to the ballroom. It doesn't matter if you're even available on that date. People would be crazy to let that kind of opportunity go, even when we can return to 250 people in the ballroom. So I think we're going to see that across the board. And I hope that, I'm trying to feel positive about the ways that we can continue to sort of connect and celebrate, even in these unique circumstances, so that we remember the best parts of it and can keep those with us and still kind of utilize what we've learned to go forward. Because otherwise, this really feels like a big bummer.
I'm following the rule to mute myself when somebody else is speaking, and then I get inspired and want to jump back in without unmuting. So Lindsay, you're talking when you're talking about these specifics. Part of what I'm hearing is in people that there's such a wish to celebrate. There's such a wish to recognize that, you know, the caravans of cars or vans or whatever going past somebody's house, that it's coming from a place of humanity, of wanting to give goodness, right? Of wanting to give goodness, even when you don't have a swag bag that you're going to be getting, or the people. And I love swag bags. I mean, it's just it's a thing, you know. It's like you want to be surprised and you're delighted and it's great, but that even in the absence of the beautiful sit down dinner, and there's no doubt in my mind that any dinner that you would put together for any type of event, that everything on the plate would be gorgeous and beautiful, and the napkins folded, and I can't even imagine all that you know, the details of beauty that you bring into events that you do. And even when that's not happening, and somebody could be with their paper plate somewhere, that there still can be a wanting to be of service, a wanting to contribute, a wanting to make something better. And it's a different type of internal process of like, what is this about for you? Is this about going and having a good time with other people, and so you don't make your contribution? Or is it that's really not what's important? It can be a lot of fun, but fundamentally, that's really not what it's about. It's about being able to be of help when you can be of help. And do you push forward with that, regardless of whatever an event may or may not look like?
You know, I think that in so many ways, events and holidays and these moments sort of mark time for all of us. It's how we not measure life in a success way, but how we sort of measure how we get from A to B to C. I mean, everything from sort of this anticipation of an event, getting ready for it, going on the diet for it, buying the outfit for it, doing those things. That is sort of a unit of time. And then the event happens. And then we move to the next unit of time. And when I think about, you know, sort of all these holidays on the calendar and, you know, the relative significance of them, I think part of it is just how we think about Memorial Day being the beginning of summer and Labor Day being the end. And how, you know, with kids, you think about what does the holiday mean versus what does the school vacation mean, and sort of how we pepper our lives with these moments. And I think that is a lot of the fear, I mean, that I felt personally in this time, which is it's like this abyss of nothingness. How do we market, and how can we help market for other people, especially disenfranchised people who are alone or who could feel left out? You know, how can we help them to mark the time? I was actually watching the news with my kids yesterday, and they were showing a story about a senior care facility of some kind where none of the residents had been able to see their families, and it was Father's Day, and so they had arranged for those who were COVID negative to be able to come up to the window of the facility, and then their family could drive up, put the window down, and they could sort of through the glass do a greeting. And we've seen so many of these stories. And my son, who's 16, he's like, I mean, why bother? They're just looking through the glass. And I was like, think about that elderly gentleman who has had nothing to look forward to for weeks, for months. He hasn't been able to see his family or do something special or have the big gathering in their facility, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And all day long, he could look forward to this drive-by moment. And those are the kinds of things. We can do a big party or we can create a small moment. But I think that's what gathering and celebration is about, is sort of creating that moment in time where we've kind of crossed over, we've hit the climax and we've crossed to the next. And, big and small ways to do that will, I hope always continue. I think that's what we've learned now for sure.
And that, as you're saying this in these special moments, I would be remiss if I didn't say, and going to July 4th, there are people who are still sheltering at home, who don't have opportunity to connect with others. And so it's also a time to think through who you know and who might be uplifted, as you're saying, Lindsay, who might be uplifted just from hearing from you. And in some way, shape, or form, that we are not back. We are in a different spot, and there are people who are in other spots and really could use that moment from any of us.
Absolutely. I've actually been finding it really interesting. Everyone talks about sort of like the Hallmark holidays and, why is it such a big deal about Valentine's Day? It used to not be a big deal. And, we all say this about all these different holidays in time, but I've been thinking now, because I do business with so many different caterers who've all been at a standstill, through COVID when live events can't happen. And many of them have converted to doing home delivery services, boxed meals or theme meals or things like that. And what I'm finding is that they are all doing something where it's like, this week we're doing our Memorial Day barbecue menu, and this week we're doing our 4th of July barbecue menu or whatever. And it seems small, but it's, I think, valuable to keep our eyes open to the moments where others are trying to help us mark the occasions and they're giving us the tools, because I really think that's maybe what Hallmark's been trying to do all along and we weren't paying attention. But I'm seeing so many people within my industry try to sort of facilitate celebration in small ways, even if it's just you by yourself with your Memorial Day themed barbecue meal. And if that creates significance, then I think then it's, valuable.
Should we go to questions? We have some really great questions from our viewers today. Lindsay, to your point around, we won't probably be in a room with 200 to 500 people anytime soon, but wondering, are event venues dead? Are live events dead, obsolete, or do you predict that they'll actually come back?
This is the $1 million question. No, I do think they'll come back. I think what we're seeing, I'm personally learning a tremendous amount about how the businesses in the event industry operate, which ones are stable and which ones are not, and whatever. I think what we're learning is most venues that have multiple revenue streams, meaning that they also have catering or they are connected to a hotel, so they're also generating revenue through rooms and things like that. Those venues are surprisingly stable and I think are going to be around to service us for a very long time. I think the most vulnerability financially are those that are just sort of standalone facilities that just rent their space. They have a single revenue stream and now they've had none and they've had to return a lot of deposits and things like that. So I'm seeing that those are the venues that need the most support. But in terms of will we gather again, I'm going to say the answer is a hearty yes. We're obviously waiting on a vaccine like everybody else, but I do think that we will take what we've learned about food safety, about hygiene, about spacing. In New York City, we are in the habit of putting too many things and too many people in too small of a space, and I believe that will end here, and we'll start to have better facilitation around that. But I think that we have a future in this because I think it's what the people want, and we're going to figure out how to give it to them.
So interesting, your thoughts on, what does it mean to come together and celebrate? And, here in New York City, for example, we're seeing a lot of sidewalk drinking bars that have sprung up to create a sense of community and to get people out of the house. What are your thoughts on bringing drinking to the streets? Is this a healthy progression or dangerous?
That's such a funny question and a good one. My husband's like, it's like we live in Europe. It's fantastic. What we've always wanted, but never figured out. I think that we respond to the moment. I was listening to Mayor de Blasio's news conference on Thursday when that was like the first announcement that officially phase 2 was going to happen on Monday and officially outdoor dining was going to happen. And he was like giddy. I mean, he was literally trying to contain his own excitement because he was so giddy to share the news that we'll actually be able to eat and drink outside again. And he was particularly giddy when he started talking about how they're going to be waiving the provisions that restaurants normally need to access to do outdoor dining and to have permission to serve liquor outdoors. And he's like, we are going to like let you just do it. He was so excited because he was sort of creating the service for our city. So I think this is a moment, I think when the seasons change and it starts to get cold out and COVID is still here, which people forget, but it will indeed be, and we start to rein things back in, that then we'll have more time to develop a more orderly sort of approach to this, and we'll probably see it naturally rescind is my best guess.
This is another really fascinating. I love the questions that are coming in today. Please, everyone, keep them coming in the comments field. Lindsay, have you considered the booming new business of divorce parties? And is that a new exciting revenue stream to be considered?
Well, now I am. I've always said, I've been doing weddings forever, for 19 years. And, I get a million questions about weddings, and people, in the end, I would say, listen, I'm not in the business of love and marriage. I'm in the business of weddings, AKA I will plan you a party for whatever you need to celebrate. And I think that is the important lesson in all of this is we need to respond to what's happening. I hope divorces aren't happening, but sure, a party sounds great. Any party sounds great to me.
One question that goes to Lindsay, both you and Risa. Is it appropriate to celebrate Americans' independence when right now many don't feel independent?
Okay. Well, I would say yes, in that just because you're celebrating doesn't mean that you're not striving. And so that you can celebrate and be striving at the same time. You can celebrate and become even more dedicated to bringing freedom and equality into this country in ways that are even more palpable and important at this point in time. So I don't necessarily believe that not celebrating makes it better. If it's not consistent with how you're feeling, and there are people who are in mourning right now and they may not be in the space of doing that, but that not celebrating doesn't have to mean that you're more committed, that you can be celebrating and be committed and just really just dig in internally for that.
Yeah, I absolutely agree wholeheartedly to all of that. And I guess what's funny to me about 4th of July, and I don't know if others feel this way too, is that because it's so closely tied to Americanism and patriotism, that I actually think about the sort of historical context of 4th of July in a way that I don't think about the historical context of most other holidays, regardless of whether or not they have them. And so much of what I've learned, and so many of us have learned in, recent moments, is about the sort of the whiteout of history and so many things. I mean, I feel like I have all the right education, and I went to all the right places and knew all the right people, and I never heard of Juneteenth till 3 weeks ago. I just didn't know about it, and so many other things. And so I think that thinking about our history feels challenging and painful right now. But just as Dr. Ryger was saying, the moment to learn is always an opportunity, and it can be done so while celebrating, while reading, while learning, while writing, in any context. And I think that it's about adding. I think the idea of Juneteenth is about adding this moment versus replacing anything. Because I think that's all what we want, is to continue to add to the fabric of our culture in a thoughtful and respectful way. So I don't think it's one versus the other, but it is a reminder that there's a lot we didn't learn the right way, I guess.
I love what you just said. It's so eloquent.
And an opportunity, if we're with our children. I love what you did with your son, by the way. of taking that moment and explaining to him. And I know 16-year-olds, I've had 2 of them. But what a shift of perspective means, right? And that what you did is you just took that moment, as we all have moments, and you helped your son gain the perspective from someone else's eyes. And that's just beautiful. Whether it's about age or race, but that's part of what we need, is to be able to put ourselves in someone else's shoes and understand their perspective. That's where we really find, connection. And that's just crucial. So thank you.
And I think also during this moment in time to feel thankful in those everyday moments of pleasure and joy as well, right? I think many of us are using this time as a step back for reflection and really thinking through everything from what is the meaning of my life to what I want to create going forward to who do I want to have around me. And I think this is a perfect moment in time as we're entering the summer months now, and thinking through everything from all the various things that we do during the summer, from vacations and holidays to birthdays and anniversaries and weddings, and creating more meaning to this point of this entire conversation around how do we experience and celebrate and be with each other in this moment in time. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Thank you, Dr. Ryger, for being who you are each and every Monday as we have these really insightful, engaging, and really fun conversations. And thank you, Neza, so much for hosting us and for everything that you're doing each and every day with Join Mayshad. And invite all of you who are watching us today to visit us at joinmayshad.com, where you too can learn more about what it means to become a member. And if you join us, we do the goodie bags. We do our discovery bag as a thank you for being a member. So excited that we actually plugged the swag bag. Love the swag bag. Thank you, everyone. See you very soon. And make sure to be with us tomorrow for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion show every Tuesday at 4, and our Women and Money show every Thursday at 4, and Workshop Wednesdays at 3 p.m. each and every Wednesday. Thank you, everyone. Have a great start to the week.